Alright guys, welcome back to another video where today you are highly encouraged to leave your thoughts on this topic down in the comments section. And this is actually a question I've been asking myself for a long time, and that is, what do I prefer? Planted tanks like this 11-gallon Aquarium rimless tank that I've got here, or African cichlid tanks? So having said that, in this video we're going to be going through some pros and cons of both planted tanks and African cichlid tanks, so let's get it going. Alright, so let's do the pros of African cichlid tanks first. And the first one is obviously the colour that the African cichlid fish show, especially when you're talking about aulonocara and Haplochromis. Some of these fish, a lot of the time, actually get confused with saltwater fish, and a lot of people that come into my home and see the 125-gallon ask if it's saltwater, and are usually very surprised when I say it's actually fresh. Some of the fish that you see in here, the aulonocara walteri, the sunshine benga, the luanda, the Placidochromis white lips, along with the others, are just showing absolutely incredible colour, and that's the main reason as to why a lot of African cichlid hobbyists initially get into African cichlids. Another huge pro for African cichlids is their activity level and personality. As you can see, they're all over this side of the tank right now because the camera's there and I'm there, and of course they all think they're getting fed. So if you want a fish that reacts a lot when you come into the room, African cichlids would be one of those, of course, along with blood parrots and some of the other classified New World cichlids that you see quite a lot of the time in your local fish stores. Obviously, one of the most popular of those is the Oscar, that is known to be the water dog of the fish world. And to be honest, I don't think the African cichlids are too far off, especially if you've not fed them in a day or two, and they'll be rummaging up the glass, and some of them will even eat out of my hand, which is pretty cool. So the final pro and the absolutely biggest joy of keeping African cichlids is the colour change. If you get these fish and they are really small, but you buy them as males, seeing the change from juvenile fish to adult fish is just incredible. The immense colour change that you can see with young aulonocara and young Haplochromis when you first get them to what they're like 6 months down the line or a year later is just awesome. And seeing this coloration happen on a daily basis really is a joy to watch, and for me that's the best part of the African cichlid hobby. So there's my 3 pros of keeping African cichlids. So now let's go on to the cons, and I'm sure a lot of you cichlid keepers will know what these are straight off the block. So the first frustration with these fish, in my opinion, is dealing with the aggression. Obviously, there is a hierarchy in every African cichlid tank, and the main male of that show tank looks awesome, second in command looks good, third in command looks decent, and then from there, a lot of the time you'll get some bullying occurring, some nipped fins, some fish stressed out to the point that they even die, which as a fish keeper is just not enjoyable. And this can basically all stem down to if you've got a good tank boss or not. For the most part, I've been lucky with my tank bosses that I've had in my show tanks, and I've not had too many issues, but every now and again I still encounter the issues that every African cichlid keeper does, which is nipped fins and a stressed out fish, and then you've got to take them out of the tank, put them in a different tank so they can relax and heal up, and that is just a huge pain and really can affect your overall enjoyment of the hobby. So the second con for me personally when keeping African cichlids, especially aulonocara and Haplochromis, is the tank size that you need in order to keep these fish properly. For the most part, aulonocara and Haplochromis get a minimum of 5 inches, and some Haplochromis can reach a max of 13-14 inches. So keeping these in a 40-gallon breeder just isn't going to work. And for the most part, I would say the minimum tank size for an aulonocara is probably 75 gallons. And if you really want them to have the space that they need, I would say a 6-foot tank is a must, especially if you want to keep some of the bigger predator haps like Fuscos and Aquariums and stuff like that. Obviously then, along with that big tank, you need big filtration, which of course costs you even more money, and then you're looking into the Fluval FX6s or other forms of filtration that a lot of the time can set you back an extra $150, $200 at a minimum. So that for me is another big con when keeping African cichlids. But having said all that, they're an absolute blast to feed. The coloration's amazing, and for the most part, that's why I keep them. But now let's move on to the planted aquariums and go through the pros and cons of keeping and creating that style of fish tank. So this tank right here is my low-tech 11-gallon Aquarium rimless tank, and I'll leave a card up above to a video that featured this one if you want to check it out. But we'll go over the pros of planted tanks first, and the first one being that it's just like having a slice of nature in your home, which for me is incredibly relaxing. And I mean, just looking at this tank just makes you chill out. You've had a tough week at work or you're stressed about something, you can just take a look at it, switch off and just relax, and there's not the chasing that you would see in an African cichlid tank for the most part. And that would have to be my number one plus of a planted aquarium. The second one would be that you can pretty much have a planted aquarium with any size tank that you want. If you wanted to do a mini tank like a 5-gallon, or even if you wanted to do a big 125-gallon full-on aquascape, high-tech with a boatload of plants, you could do that. So you're not limiting yourself to any specific size tank, whereas with African cichlids, especially the aulonocara and Haplochromis, as I touched on before, you really are limited by the size tank that you can have. So third and final pro to planted tanks is the fact that you can just create something so beautiful and ever-changing. I enjoy aquascaping in general and trying to create these awesome tanks, and I still do that in my African cichlid tanks, but obviously you're limited. The plants just allow you that extra element that really help you put a tank together and put an aquascape together. And for the most part, you can't do that with African cichlid tanks, although I'm sure we'll get people in the comments talking about Anubias and other plants that work for them. But you know, you can't do a carpet of Monte Carlo and dwarf hairgrass in an African cichlid tank. It's just not going to work. So, you know, having planted tanks just enables you to do that much more with the hobby in general, and just enables you to create something so beautiful. And it's something that is going to evolve and change over time as the plants grow and become healthier. And for me, that's just the biggest joy of planted aquariums, and something that I really enjoy seeing on a day-to-day basis, just like I do with the African cichlids colouring up over time when you buy them as juveniles. So now let's move on to the cons of planted tanks. And the first one for me is that plants die. Obviously, plants are another living element that you're putting into your fish tank. And just like fish and shrimp and anything else that you can put in your home aquarium, plants are also living. And sometimes if you ain't got the correct conditions for them to grow and thrive in, then they'll melt and they'll die. And I've recently had that issue with my S. repens, which was incredibly frustrating. And I can honestly see why people can get so easily deterred if they're into the hobby and they get straight into keeping fish and plants at the same time without knowing a great deal about either. So now the second negative of keeping planted tanks is that the vast majority of fish that you can keep in smaller planted tanks usually tend to die a little bit quicker than your African cichlids. Average age for an African cichlid, if they don't die of something like blow or ick or anything like that, that is essentially the hobbyist's fault, then they can sometimes last in a home aquarium for 7 to 10 years, whereas the vast majority of the smaller planted tank fish, you're looking at, 2 to 5 years. For a beta or any other fish, tetra, shrimp, you're looking at even less. So that can be very frustrating, and you find yourself having to restock your tank way more often than what you would your African cichlid tanks, which for me is a massive negative, as of course you can get attached to some of the fish that you keep, and 2 years for them might be a decent life, but for you, especially if you're an African cichlid hobbyist, you're just not used to it, and that can definitely be a annoying and costly factor when keeping planted aquarium fish, especially when they're on the smaller side. The third and final con for keeping planted tanks and trying to maintain planted tanks, especially if you're big into aquascaping or trying to aquascape like I am, and that's the time that it takes to maintain the tanks. This tank, as you can see, is heavily planted, and it also took a decent while for me to aquascape it. So every week when I'm doing water changes on the tank, you've got to wipe down the glass, make sure it's free from algae, because of course you've got lights on longer than what you do African cichlid tanks. You've also got to trim the plants, you've got to mix up the sand to make sure that it's that pure pearly white that I like looking at. You've also got to clean any algae off the rocks, although my nearite snail is doing bits on that job, so shout out to that nearite snail, absolute legend. But overall maintenance on this tank, even though it is only 11 gallons, takes me probably about 45 minutes to an hour a week, so it does take quite a while, so I can't even imagine what it would take on a bigger tank. So that would be my third con when keeping planted tanks. But overall, I absolutely love my planted tanks, and I also love my African cichlid tanks. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Right now I'm probably about 50-50. Love my African cichlids, love breeding them, but I love the slice of nature that I've got in my home with the additions of my 2 planted tanks. And my wife also enjoys the planted aquarium that we've got upstairs, so that's a huge bonus for me. Anyway guys, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave it a like, so hopefully it'll get a little push by YouTube, and we might get this video going to more planted tank hobbyists, and we can have a friendly and respectful debate down in the comments section. I would absolutely love that. But for now, thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next one.